to get into our next session, which is regarding talent strategy during this crazy pandemic. I believe we've got all of our guests here with us. Nancy, Shannon?
We're here.
We're here.
Great. And I seem to be missing Laura.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's great to hear your voice. Well, guys, let me just make one quick adjustment really quick. While I'm doing that, I'm going to ask our guests if you guys can give a little bit of background on each of you. Nancy, let's start with you. Sure.
I have my own executive search firm, recruiting firm, AAP Advisors. A little bit about my background. I've been recruiting specifically in real estate for about 18 years. I work across disciplines, so I work with owners, developers, investors, managers, large financial institutions, general contractors, and I work across the board product-wise as well. But I do a lot of work in the student housing sector, simply because I have 2 long-term clients that are large owner developer managers of student housing properties, and just sort of lends me to being in that space a lot.
Great, Laura, we'll go to you next.
Hi, I'm Laura Puckett-Bowler. I work with Spellman Johnson. We're a leadership search firm working with higher education and other associations and nonprofits. I've been working with them for about almost 2 years. Prior to that, I was the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at the University of South Carolina Upstate Campus. And I got my start working in student activities and worked in higher ed for over 30 years at other institutions, including Fairfield University and Texas Christian University, as well as the University of South Carolina Columbia campus.
Fantastic. And Shannon?
Hi, yeah, I'm Shannon Fela, and founder and CEO of S5 Consulting. We're a consulting group out of Chicago, Illinois, and we're really focused on helping our clients, whether it's property management companies, owners, investors, really just help navigate growth, change, and any type of projects that they have upcoming. My entire career has been spent in the student housing sector. I started my career over a decade ago on site and kind of seen every single position from a CI to a director of training and transitions and operation support recently. So background is definitely operationally focused, and yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Well, fantastic. So let me kind of set the stage a little bit for this session. As the pandemic grew and the economy shrank, student housing operators and on-campus housing departments alike put hiring freezes in place. Likewise, employees of those companies and universities who were looking to make a vertical jump or to make a move to get closer to their desired geographic location, they began to fear the longevity of their current positions. The purpose of this panel is to talk about what employers need to do to keep their recruiting funnel going and and to also give advice to housing professionals about how they should be capitalizing on this time to make their resume stronger. Additionally, we want to spend some time talking about the importance of the onboarding processes and leadership retreats, as well as those holiday parties that are going to be part of this coming fall. Let's start with recruiting if we can. There we go. So Nancy, your firm specializes in recruiting site to really C-suite level employees in the student housing and the multifamily markets. You've been an incredible resource throughout my career of locating site and regional level talent that I've needed to place. I know you've remained busy with recruiting and placement for several student housing operators during this pandemic, but for those operators who did have to put a freeze on hiring, what should they be doing during this freeze, and to really just to make sure that they have some great candidates ready when that hiring freeze is over?
Yeah. You know, Wes, just recently have we had a client put a hold on their hiring. I know you and I have spoken previously, and fortunately until this week, our experience has been that companies are continuing to hire. They are optimistic. The universities are opening in the fall. But to answer your question, my suggestions for operators that have put hiring on hold is to, to really just stay in front of and continue to build your candidate pipeline. Unfortunately, we all probably know somebody that's lost their job as a result of COVID. So there are a lot of high performers without jobs right now. That makes this really a prime time to reach out to those people. Start a dialogue, get them excited about upcoming roles and your company so that you're on their radar. Keep your candidate pool engaged, basically. You can send press releases. Individual managers can send emails. If you have a recruiting staff, those people have time on their hands, unfortunately, right now. So for them, that's an opportune time for companies to maybe work on their online application system. I don't know one person that doesn't groan whenever they're filling out an online application. Some can be really tedious. So this is maybe a great time for companies to fix that process, so it's more streamlined and easier for candidates. Take advantage of this time to clean up your ATS, your applicant tracking system, so that more than likely, that's a very expensive technology your company is invested in that's not being utilized fully. So my experience, I know working with internal recruiting staff or hiring managers, is that their ATS is not being utilized. Maybe they've never had formal training. Maybe employees never had formal training on the system. This might be a great time for that to happen as well.
Good point. Laura, let's move to you. Your firm recruits leaders for higher education, literally everything from financial aid and athletics to presidents and health counseling personnel. But you've also been a vice chancellor and a dean of students. You and I first met when you were in that position at USC Upstate in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So even before Spelman Johnson, you were recruiting everyone from RAs to directors. Universities seem to be dealing with even more uncertainty right now when it comes to hiring, as they're having to wait on budget approvals from the state level. And specifically on the housing side, they are still trying to figure out how many beds they will even fill. And of course, there is the chance their university may have to start the semester in remote study. What are some tips for those housing directors on how to have candidates ready and in the pipeline when they are finally free to pull that hiring trigger? And especially when they're so busy right now, just trying to figure out logistics for students to return.
I think, we've seen, much like Nancy said, we've had a few firms that have canceled schools that have canceled some searches, but for the most part, it's mainly been some pausing. And I think that the pause is when they are waiting to find out what the financials are going to look like and what the fall semester really looks like and what do they need. But I would encourage folks on campus to do everything you can do virtually. If you can, go ahead and start some Zoom interviews with stakeholder groups. Go ahead and do those things that you can do to start narrowing a pool down, because of course we can't control this. It's understandable. Most of the candidates I've talked to are certainly understanding, and you don't have to have a need to apologize for these pauses in searches. I think it's really important to keep potential candidates warm, and doing that, keeping good communication, sending them updates about where you are in the process, what your timeline looks like. Also use that opportunity to send out virtual red carpet sort of messages. Send them information on the community, especially if you're not sure when they can visit campus or come to your town, so that they can start thinking about what the area would look like if they are the one that ends up moving there. But I think just giving them good communication and being flexible with the Zoom type meetings is one of the things that I would encourage.
Yeah, I tell you, I could tell just in the past week, that I don't know what triggers are kind of being pulled in order for this to happen, but a lot of the housing administrators that I'm talking to as it relates to our Wednesday webinars have really gotten busy with speaking to candidates that they plan on hiring. So that's a great sign, and that's some great advice as well if they're not at that point yet where they can start having those interviews. So let's talk a little bit about the onboarding process. Shannon, you've got a lot of experience with onboarding, not just a single employee, but entire teams and multiple teams in some situations. With property takeovers and things like that, I know that becomes really, really difficult. But one of the services you provide to your client or to your clients is onboarding assistance. Onboarding processes have been virtual for the past 12 weeks or so, and I hear a lot of companies touting that it seems to be as effective and way cheaper than having a transition team fly to a site or have a new hire go to headquarters for orientation training. But do you think it's smart for companies to accept virtual onboarding as a best practice moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely think when we're talking about onboarding or any type of learning past the recruiting stage, everyone is in this huge rush to say we're going like virtual, and it's almost like a who's going to get there first. And I really do think it is smart for companies to accept the virtual onboarding. It's really important to create these SOPs or agendas that can be kind of easily repeatable, because let's face it, we don't know if we're going to hit another wave of this, or we don't know what the future looks like. And we're dealing with so many different clients and end users that the virtual onboarding platform needs to be accepted. However, and I'm going to star this, I don't think that it should be labeled as necessarily kind of like the best practice or a go-to moving forward. I do still think that if you have the option to, if you have a transition or you're bringing your new community managers to headquarters, that definitely should be done in person if so. And, first, I think the simplest reason behind it is like we right now have so much evidence through surveys. Like universities have sent, surveys to their students and their professors. Companies have sent surveys to their trainers and their new onboarded employees. And 85% of the population is telling us we want in person. We want to be able to raise our hand. We want to see that smile. We want to feel the energy that's between, all these individuals. So people are wanting it, first off. And then, second, when we break down onboarding, like to its core, like really, what is it? It is in its truest form, just like your first impression. And we all know how important first impressions can be. And through a screen, you're not going to be able to feel, hear a tone or see the body language. And your first week is just so important to building the foundation and the rapport that's going to take you through the rest of your time at a company. So, when you're, especially transitions, for example, you want to see your end user or your employees interacting with residents. You want to see how they interact with the rest of the team, so you can help, into week 2, week 3. And, I think too, when we look at the statistics, I'm almost positive it's like 85% of employees get to the first year mark if they have a really good onboarding process. So at the end of it, people are saying, oh, it's cheaper and oh, it's more effective. And like my answer is, yeah, absolutely, like in the short term, but we don't know the long-term effects yet. So if people are asking for in-person onboarding and we know that a screen is not going to be able to give us the full experience, I think it's still the best practice to stay in person if possible and look at the virtual onboardings, for scenarios that it's a must, or for when we're getting into more of the week 2s, the week 3s, once the foundation is built.
Yeah. And it's never a thing that you're ever going to see on a screen. It's kind of I hear people talk all the time about, it's their body language. I don't feel like they're getting it or whatever. But I also think, it's kind of little comments that you hear around the corner, or, some other looks that you may be getting, unless if you're getting that full periphery of everything that's going on, you really can't get into really understanding how much information you're missing from
Absolutely.
doing that on site or that HQ onboarding. So yeah, great thoughts. I hope that that our industry doesn't look at it from a standpoint of, oh yeah, we learned this was way cheaper, let's just do it this way. No, this is just a necessary evil right now. I really don't see it being something that I think we can learn how to do it better for a temporary fix. But those that you onboard virtually, you've always got to go back as soon as possible and make sure that you're doing it the way that you originally planned. So let's talk really quick about the recruits. Nancy, for off-campus housing professionals out there, regardless if they were looking to make a move prior to the pandemic, they've been a part of something pretty extraordinary with this pandemic, and that I think will make them more valuable both in or outside of student housing, really. What recommendations do you have for them on how they can use this experience to make their resume stronger and their interview more powerful?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think they're acquiring new skills that will make them more valuable in, going forward in the long run. Think about how everyone has had to really just pivot very quickly and work in so many different ways than they always have. And they can find positive things about what we're all having to live through right now with this. Just to give you a couple of examples that come to the top of my head, they're probably working remotely, which can be very difficult at first. You're working with limited technology. You're certainly working with distractions. You're having to hold yourself accountable. Let's face it, there's nobody sitting in a desk, in an office next to you, noticing what you are or are not doing at your desk. So if you're successful at that, you learn that you have the ability to adapt. You can be more intentional in how you spend your time. You can really, that can lend a feeling of personal growth and learning great time management. So I think that's one positive area. Second, a myriad of people are telling me that I speak with on a daily basis that they're having to learn new technologies with all of this. The virtual walkthroughs to lease their property. That's certainly a new skill set for a lot of people to add to their experience and their resume. On-site operators that I've spoken with have had to adjust to, differing policies several times a week, sometimes, several times during 1 week period due to changing conditions and just the unknown of how this was all going to unfold. So, they've had to be very adaptable. They've had to be very accountable for relaying all of that changing information to their residents, all, in the course of maintaining stringent safety policies that are just all new and unknown to them as well. So once again, I think those are traits that can be so valuable, a lesson and learning experience to carry forward. They're also leaning, I'm told, obviously even more heavily on social media than they ever did before, and exploring just new ways to reach their audience and market and showcase their properties. So through additional social media platforms, they're having to really even more so think outside the box. So, I think those are all new skills that will help them not only grow professionally, but just really build a more diverse resume.
Yeah. Absolutely. Laura, same question for the on-campus professionals who have now gone through this. What recommendation do you have for them on how they use this experience to make their resume stronger?
I think some of the same things that Nancy said, but having the opportunity to volunteer to serve in different capacities, maybe that they haven't had before, will certainly add to their marketability in their resume. I also, remind them that being creative and thinking outside the box, maybe in environments where that hasn't always been valued, now is a very high value. I've had the opportunity to talk to a few presidents in the past few weeks, and when we talk about who are the leaders on their campus during this time, it's the people that are able to think creatively and think differently, outside of maybe what the policies have been. So really being able to sell that and talk about that flexibility, the resilience they've had to, and the adaptability, I think are all the major skills that they need to highlight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was living in Roanoke when the Virginia Tech shootings happened, and so had some friends that were involved with the housing department there during that time, and some of them have gone on to other universities. But I was just talking to them recently, and just trying to get in a feel for how they're dealing with things right now, and they said, "Wes, this is nothing." It's just it's tragic. It's something that we wish didn't happen, but this is I felt like I was much better prepared to talk with parents and work through these issues based on what they had gone through previously. So I do think the generation that's now in some of those kind of mid-level housing positions, this is going to be something that down the road, I think it's going to give them a lot of I don't want to say necessarily opportunity, but I think it's just going to give them a different perspective that I think a lot of directors and staff are just going to have a huge appreciation for. So yeah, that's interesting. Shannon, let's now get into the retreats and the holiday parties. You also help clients with event planning of their events and conferences. As I think about the companies that typically host everything from budget planning workshops to the holiday parties that are coming up this fall, I know they are questioning if they should even try to plan those events this fall and going into the winter. You've been pretty vocal on LinkedIn in the past few weeks about how companies should be approaching these events. What do these companies need to be thinking about when planning these?
Yeah, like you said, I definitely do have some pretty strong opinions on this topic. And because of the long-term negative effects of taking away engagement, I really don't think companies should be like all out canceling conferences, canceling workshops, canceling parties, or, in this case, we'll call it canceling events that have, 15 plus people. Instead of asking, should we be canceling? The question really should be, and I know we just talked about this, but it's how are we going to optimize or, better deliver the content or the message that event was planned to do. And, I think we're at a point in the world where we are no longer we cannot make in-person attendance or having 300 team members get on planes. And we can't make that mandatory because, and I think it's going to be that way over the next, let's call it year. So I think companies should be really focusing on getting creative with, are we going to be streaming events? Are we going to pre-record? Or even think about staggering type of events where if you're going to have, maybe typically you have a workshop with 50 team members, maybe you do 2 workshops and you stagger weeks of how individuals are going to attend these things. And really what I've been recommending to my client is this shift in mentality to where it's let your end user, give them a pick your own path or pick your own type of venture culture. And what this means is put the ball in your end user or employee's court and say, here, we are going to be hosting X event. X event is going to have 3 viewing options. At this point in time, you pick what you feel most comfortable with. And by doing this, you give the power back to your employees. You give them more confidence. You help ease those anxieties. Because I think at the end of the day, right now, what do we all want? We want a little bit of power to make decisions. And I think putting that in their court and, the headquarters teams, figuring out just ways to adapt. And if there were 3 things that if anybody was going to take away, it's definitely streaming services, do your research, make sure that you have IT to support, because we all know if we're watching a video and there's lag time or there's a pause, you get frustrated, and it's like, so do your viewers. So look into investing that way. Also, too, videographers are going to be huge right now, making sure that you're delivering videos with the right brand, the right quality, and somebody who has experience kind of mixing and matching, different segments together to really tell a powerful story. If you don't have a videographer, like maybe find somebody who can come in, part-time for just those big events. But videography is going to be huge. And then last but not least, I think everyone really needs to be more intentional and very proactive with your save the dates or invites to whatever event you're hosting. Because you want to give your end user a lot of time to think through and say, okay, what am I looking at? What are the dates? How do I feel? And just be more intentional, because it's no longer going to be like, are you going to attend this party? Yes or no. We're going to probably be shifting into am I attending and in what capacity? So that's kind of where my head's at. I don't think canceling should be an option. I do think let's get more creative. Let's figure out how to bring experiences home. And for a Christmas party, for example, maybe your company spent $10,000 or $20,000 last year. If you have individuals who don't want to come, order their family a Grubhub gift card and say, hey, celebrate with us just at home. And there's so many little ideas that you can throw in to really pack a really big punch. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've made several middle notes as you were saying that, because there's definitely some things there I haven't thought about. Laura, kind of the same question, but university housing departments and student affairs typically have training retreats at this time of the year. As they're onboarding new RAs, et cetera. I imagine you've overseen a few of those, at least indirectly. Mm-hmm. Drawing on that experience, what recommendations or thoughts do you have for housing directors who may be planning those types of events?
With everything being up in the air right now, I would say start early, where lots of times you were waiting because of financial constraints on when you would bring those student leaders back to campus. Now you could start now. You could do, you could start some weekly meetings. You could start something ahead of time. And I agree with Shannon, you don't want everything to be virtual, but there's some things that probably lend itself in training with students to those formats. But I would also use this opportunity to really build the skills of your student leaders, those older RAs, those returning people. They really know what the students are engaged with in those different formats. Maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's Snapchat, maybe it's doing some Insta, but really use them for two reasons. One, they know, and those younger staff are going to listen to the seasoned staff a little bit more than they are guys in suits and ties. And we just know that's true. I would really also use this as time to supplement to when you can get to meet with those in person. One of the things that universities struggle with are those 2 weeks before students come back. Everybody wants to meet, everybody wants to do training. Maybe you do something a little bit earlier with some of those staff that it's always hard to get in to see your RAs or get in to do the trainings with. So I would just capitalize on this and leverage those opportunities for student leaders to be involved with both the creation and maybe even being the leaders of some of that training online. But definitely utilize that because it builds their resume, and we're all about helping student leaders get better. And when they go out and interview, they can talk about what skills they've built during this time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, guys, I appreciate it so much. I know we're running a little bit over because of some difficulties at the beginning, and I want to get to our sponsors. But again, thanks so much for taking the time out to not just be a part of this particular panel, but you guys have been a great help in just kind of planning things. Laura, you've played a huge role in helping us get folks for our Wednesday webinars. And I just want to tell you again, thank you for that. And guys, I appreciate it. Any other parting thoughts? All right. Shannon, I was expecting something from you.
I'll say, I'll go all day. I'll say, you don't want me to start because then I won't stop. So. I gotta watch it. Gotta be, yeah, conscious of the time.
Gotcha.